Hello, and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. It's Tuesday, the 21st of June. I'm Andrew Wilson, and this is Scotland at 7. This evening, I have the latest daily update from Ukraine on day 118 of the illegal Russian war of aggression, and then I will introduce this evening's guest, and then together we will look at today's headlines from Scotland and around the world. Russia has gathered almost all of its forces to storm the settlements near the embattled eastern city of Severodonetsk, according to Ukraine's Deputy Defence Minister, Hanna Maliar. Decisive battles are taking place in the area of Severodonetsk, with the Russian leadership aiming to reach the borders of the Luhansk region by the end of the week, Maliar has been quoted as saying. Russian troops have captured the frontline village of Toshkivka near the twin cities of Severodonetsk and Lysychansk in the Donbass region. The head of the Severodonetsk District Military Administration, Roman Vlasenko, told Ukrainian television, "As of today, according to our information, Toshkivka is controlled entirely by the Russians." Russian officials have accused Ukraine of launching missile strikes against 3 gas rigs in the Black Sea south of Odessa, in an apparent escalation of Kyiv's attempts to weaken Russia's maritime dominance. 3 people were killed and 7 people were injured by Russian shelling in the Kharkiv region in the last 24 hours, according to the governor, Oleh Syniehubov. 2 Americans captured in Ukraine are currently in the Russian-backed separatist region of Donetsk in eastern Ukraine, the Interfax news agency has reported. There are fears that the pair could face the death penalty. The sister of Brahim Sadoun, the Moroccan man who was captured while serving in the Ukrainian military and sentenced to death in Donetsk, has said she fears he has been abandoned by his own government and has called on the international community to claim my brother. A food warehouse in Ukraine's southern port city of Odessa was destroyed by a Russian missile attack on Monday, according to the Ukrainian military. The military said Russian forces fired 14 missiles at southern Ukraine during a 3-hour barrage. European countries are united in their support for granting Ukraine the status of a European Union member candidate, Luxembourg's Foreign Affairs Minister has said. And Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz said Berlin will send weapons to Ukraine as long as needed, while also reaffirming its commitment to stand with Lithuania and other Eastern allies. A Nobel Peace Prize won by the Russian journalist Dmitry Muratov has sold for a record $103.5 million at auction. Muratov sold the medal to raise funds for Ukrainian children who've been displaced by the war. Turkey says it does not consider next week's NATO summit as the final deadline for resolving its objections to Finland and Sweden joining the military alliance. And Russia's ambassador to the United Kingdom, Andrei Kelin, is to be banned from the parliamentary estate in Westminster until further notice, according to a message sent out by the Common Speaker and the Lord Speaker on Monday. The ban, which also applies to all other accredited Russian diplomats and officials in the UK, was confirmed in writing for the first time. Now, I'm lucky enough to be joined this evening by our regular contributor, Chris McCusker. Chris is a member of the SNP Trade Union Group, he's a humanitarian aid worker, he's a carer, and he's a disabilities advocate. Chris, good evening. How are you keeping?
Yeah, I'm grand, Andrew. It's been a while, glad to join you this evening.
Well, it's great to see you too, Chris. You're right, it's been a wee while, and thank you for joining us this evening on Scotland at 7. A meeting of the Scottish Government Resilience Room has been told of the impact of UK-wide rail strikes on Scotland. The Deputy First Minister, John Swinney, was joined by ministers, including the Transport Secretary, Michael Matheson, and Transport Minister, Jenny Gilruth, to hear the latest of the situation. Today marked the first of 3 days of strike action this week, with more planned for Thursday and Saturday, with the possibility of further action over the summer. Due to shift patterns, the entire week is being disrupted, rather than only the 3 selected strike dates. The resilience room has been up and running since this morning and will be in operation until Sunday evening to monitor impacts and oversee and coordinate the response from ministers. The meeting also heard about extra preparedness around major events such as the Royal Highland Show, freight mitigation plans from major retailers to keep supermarkets stocked as much as possible, and wider resilience plans. Earlier today, the Transport Minister wrote to the UK Government urging them to do more to enable a settlement of the UK-wide rail dispute. In her letter to Grant Shapps, Ms Gilruth called for the UK Government to do more to resolve the dispute, which will significantly affect operations in Scotland, despite the Scottish Government having no say in the negotiations. The Scottish Government has consistently rejected the rail reform programme, which interferes with and erodes Scotland's devolved competencies within the rail network. Speaking after chairing the Resilience Room meeting, the Deputy First Minister, John Swinney, said, "With a busy summer upon us, there needs to be more urgency from UK ministers and the Department of Transport to get this situation fixed, and fast. The lack of action being taken by the UK Government is a dereliction of duty." "We have had our own issues in Scotland," he continued, "but the difference between our approach and that of the UK Government could not be more stark. We have sought dialogue, compromise, and agreement, whereas the UK Government has deliberately inflamed the situation, causing misery for the travelling public." So, Chris, there's quite a lot in this story to get our teeth into this evening. Firstly, in her letter to Grant Shapps, Jenny Gilruth said, "As you note, I was scheduled to meet Wendy Morton MP later this week. However, Ms Morton has subsequently cancelled the meeting. Given the impact the strike will have on Scotland, I expect that you will ensure this is rearranged as soon as possible." Now, in December 2021, Wendy Morton was appointed the Rail Minister at the Department of Transport in Westminster. So, from all the news I've heard this week, we were being told that the Westminster government was keeping out of the discussions between the RMT and the rail operators. That Wendy Morton's cancelling meetings suggests that that might not be the case, and she might be busy with the discussions. So, do you think, does this cancellation and does this approach, does this tell us, does this give us the truth about what the Westminster government is doing in the middle of this dispute?
Well, to my mind, what the Westminster government are doing is that they are feeding off of the grievance that they are creating around the whole issue of the RMT going on strike. And what they're doing is they're trying to counter argue and drag Labour into it, which doesn't help the situation because Labour are flip flopping all over the place. Several MPs are supporting the strikes, and several MPs have yet to come out and either for or against. And we don't know what Keir Starmer we don't actually know what his position is. So therefore, as a whole, we don't know exactly what Labour are all about on this issue. So Boris Johnson will be able to feed off that disenfranchisement, and he can actually turn the narrative, and basically say that it's all Labour's fault and it's nothing to do with the government. Now, again, what we have to point out is the fact and you eloquently done so, is the fact that this is a national dispute, and Network Rail working not just in England and Wales, but also in Scotland. We have no control over what happens on Network Rail. And I've long called for, now that the Scottish Government are in charge of the Scottish Railways, they are not in charge of Network Rail, which is, essentially the rails, the overhead lines, and the infrastructure.
Mhm.
I mean, we really only run the trains, which that mainly concerns ASLEF and RMT, drivers and conductors,
Mhm.
and also the cleaning staff at the depots. But that said, the Scottish Government are hamstrung to do anything because it is still, largely dependent on a national network infrastructure. So therefore, that national network infrastructure should be sorted out at the root, which is England. And as long as you have an English company in, control of, certain aspects of our rail system, then the Scottish government really are, as I say, hamstrung to do anything about it. So I mean, Jenny Goodruth's absolutely 100% correct to point out the fact that the Westminster government are negligent and not facilitating these meetings in order to try and progress things, pardon the expression, further down the line.
Mhm.
So I mean, they are actually, to my mind, they are actually using this, as a decisive tool, in order to,
Yep.
keep one over the UK Labour Party.
Absolutely, Chris. Thank you. And actually, we'll talk a little bit, unusually for this evening, we'll talk about the Labour Party two or three times, I think, this evening. But the Labour Party is the focus of our next item because Keir Starmer is on a collision course with Labour Party MPs who are backing trade union strike action after at least three junior frontbenchers defied his instructions and joined RMT union picket lines this morning. Kate Osborne and Paula Barker, both parliamentary private secretaries to shadow ministers, tweeted that they had shown solidarity with striking workers this morning. The third frontbencher defying Starmer's ban was Navendu Mishra, a Labour whip. He tweeted, "As a proud trade unionist, I stand with all workers on our railway network who are taking industrial action to fight for their jobs and to keep passengers safe." The Jarrow MP Kate Osborne tweeted that she would always stand on the side of the workers. She was pictured alongside RMT strikers in Bromley in southeast London. And British Labour in Scotland's Scottish leader, Anna Sarwar, tweeted a picture of himself meeting striking RMT workers in Glasgow. "Solidarity with those on the picket lines. This is a crisis entirely of the government's making," he wrote. Mr. Starmer's deputy leader, Angela Rayner, who was a union rep before entering politics and has frequently appeared on picket lines in the past, posted what appeared to be a carefully worded tweet. "Workers have been left with no choice. No one takes strike action lightly. I will always defend their absolute right to do so for fairness at work." She It is understood that no decision will be taken about whether to discipline MPs pictured on picket lines until the industrial action has ended this coming weekend. So, Chris, firstly, in a memo that was leaked to Politics Home on Monday, Starmer's office is said to have told Labour MPs that they must show leadership, which they said meant frontbenchers, including PPSs, should not be on picket lines. Is that in any way a sustainable approach for Labour politicians, not showing solidarity with their comrades?
Well, you use two powerful words there, to my mind, and that's comrades, obviously, and solidarity. And it's something that is sadly bereft of the Labour Party. The whole ethos of the Labour Party is to represent the working people. And to my mind, I don't think that Keir Starmer's actually doing that, in any way, shape, or fashion. I mean, I, I'm no great lover of Jeremy Corbyn, but at least Jeremy Corbyn, pinned his colours to the mast, and and did actually, uh, you, you know, uh, constantly throughout his parliamentary career. In the run up to being the Labour leader and being the opposition, he proudly stood up for any workers and any workers' right to strike. Which is, I personally think, wholly correct. Uh, so again, we're finding that the Keir Starmer is all over the place here. And as I said before, that's an open goal to the Tories, and to Boris Johnson, because he can feed off that division. So I mean, they are stuck between a rock and a hard place, because if they don't show solidarity in a camaraderie fashion, as is their wont to do, they will lose a hell of a lot of support, not just in England, but in Scotland as well. And again, with Anas is not only at loggerheads with the actual leadership of the UK Labour Party, let alone the branch office, but he's also at loggerheads again with the STUC. Earlier on, the STUC, which is the sort of like leading body of the trade unions in Scotland, have come out in favour of Scotland's having the right to ask a question with regards to self-determination. So I mean,
Yes, of course.
again, you find that there's no clear sort of like train of thought here. There's no coherent understanding of how they can represent their members, and at the same token, stay on the right side of the workers.
Completely, Chris. And just very briefly, you mentioned him there. Do you think, is anyone persuaded by a millionaire dentist rocking up on a picket line in Glasgow this morning?
No, 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 no. I mean, really, not really. I mean, my personal involvement with Anas has been. I'll be quite frank. It's been a kind of like a fractious one after I asked him how to square the empire. After what they'd done in
Mhm.
India in 1910. So I mean, he subsequently blocked me from Twitter, and also he got the Scottish Labour Party to block me from Twitter as well. Obviously, he doesn't understand the whole ethos of comradeship. Where
If
obviously I
only,
was offering constructive criticism, but that's neither here nor there.
exactly.
Whereas
If only,
my
if only Anna's understood.
good friend Richard Leonard, that we had many a disagreement. I mean, both of us were in the GMB. I was one of his reps,
Mhm.
and yeah, we would openly disagree, but he still kept the channels of communication open. So I mean, for somebody to
Aye,
take on constructive criticism, that's obviously a discerning trait.
you've got to be able to listen. Absolutely, Chris. Thank you. Let's move on to our next story now, because legislation to establish a national care service for Scotland will ensure the best possible outcomes for people accessing care and support and end the postcode lottery of care. The National Care Service Bill will make Scottish ministers accountable for adult social care in Scotland, a change strongly supported by those responding to the recent consultation on the plans. The bill provides the foundation for the NCS and enables the fine detail of the new service to be co-designed with people who have direct experience of social care services. Plans have also been published to explain how that collaboration will work, and the aims are to support people in their own homes or among family, friends, and community wherever possible, with seamless transitions between services. Create a charter of rights and responsibilities for social care with a robust complaints and redress process. Introduce rights to breaks for unpaid carers. Introduce visiting rights for residents living in adult care homes, giving legal force to what's called Anne's Law. Ensure fair employment practices and national pay bargaining for the social care workforce. Focus on prevention and early intervention before people's needs escalate. Create a new national social work agency to promote training and development, provide national leadership, and set and monitor standards in social work. On a visit to the Aberdeen-based charity VSA, which supports people with a wide range of social care needs, the Cabinet Secretary for Health and Social Care, Humza Yousaf, said, "This is the most ambitious reform of public services since the creation of the Scottish National Health Service. People have told us they want a national care service, accountable to Scottish ministers, with services designed and delivered locally. That's exactly what we're going to deliver. He continued, the design of the National Care Service will have human rights embedded throughout, and the actual shape and detail of how the NCS works will be designed with those who have direct experience of accessing and providing social care. So, Chris, firstly, a quick think about the politics here. Hamza Yusuf has said and has told us that the consultation strongly supports making Scottish ministers accountable for adult social care in Scotland. Now, that's laudable and understandable, but is it sensible in political terms? At the moment, if a Spearg so much as coughs in the wrong direction in Dunoon, Glenn Campbell, Alex Cole Hamilton, and Jackie Baillie immediately demand that at least one Scottish minister resign on the spot. Will that just get worse with the social care service?
Well, yeah, but by the same token, it's wholly appropriate that the whole idea of us having our own parliament, our own ministers, whether they be yellow or red or blue or tingy red blue, and obviously green as well. God knows what colour the Alex Cole Hamilton is running under at the moment. But the whole idea of it is that the ministers in government should be should be held to account wholly on their actions and their deeds. And it is to make the Scottish government more accountable and more transparent. And there is a, a obviously a point of contact that if it's not going right, then that person should be able to explain themselves. So I think this is as stated out by Humza, is the fact that this is a radical reform, and it's long overdue. Speaking as an unpaid carer myself, yeah, I mean, I've been calling for parity of esteem, for unpaid carers, solely for the work that we do. Currently, under the UK government, we get recompensed 87 pence an hour for looking
Yep.
after our family members and our friends and stuff like that. And yes, I understand the argument that some, do more than others, and some are, I'm not in this bracket, but some are on 24/7 call. But there has to be a certain level, and the Scottish government have made strides towards that. Obviously, with the choosing of the uh, supplement payment, through the new Social Security departments. But we could
Mhm.
go a lot further if, obviously, we had our own borrowing powers. And again, if we, were not acting with one hand tied behind our back in so many other areas, which makes it difficult to actually formulate the policies that we wish to enact.
Absolutely, Chris. Thank you. And as you say, there are a number of aspects of this legislation that are addressing, for example, your situation, an unpaid carer. For example, the introduction of rights to breaks for unpaid carers. So it struck me that this bill is, as you would perhaps expect, if it is inspired and reflects the huge changes that the creation of the National Health Service in Scotland brought. Do you think that this bill is likely to bring about the similar kind of transformation for the social care service in Scotland?
Well, I'm really hope so, that it does, because, as I say, this is long overdue, and again, it's high time that we actually look at the whole system of the NHS care.
Mhm.
And I mean care as in social care and aftercare of
Mhm.
patients.
Mhm. Yep.
Because obviously it impacts on occupied bed numbers, and obviously discharge back out into the community, where patients are actually bed blocking and stuff like that.
Yep.
But again,
Yep.
to get back onto your point, I've got a penchant for living in my tax haven in Lanzarote. That I recently took my elder brother out there
Hmm.
for a fortnight's holiday. That
Hmm.
that really wasn't a holiday because I've still got to
No.
deal with his issues. I've still got
Yep.
to deal with his regime, and it restricts me somewhat to actually enjoy a foreign holiday because I'm still dealing with the same, sort of like issues that I've got back home. Luckily, I was blessed that my cousin came with me and she was able to sort of like share the workload, shall we say. But you're still
Yep.
working. You know what I
Yep.
mean? You're
That's it.
still you're still methodically sorting out medicine and stuff like that. You're again thinking
Yep.
about the things that that he would rather do. Not rather what you would do. In order to sort of like manage his
Yep.
time and stuff like that, and keep him interested and
Completely,
keep his
Chris.
mind away from other things. So I mean, it really isn't a break.
As you say, the obligations never end. You're absolutely right, and I completely get that, Chris. Thank you. Let's move to our next item now, because a leaked letter has revealed that Westminster is seeking to cut restrictions on bankers' pay and bonuses. A leaked letter from Steve Barclay, Boris Johnson's chief of staff, to Rishi Sunak, outlines a plan to end restrictions on city bosses' pay, which Tory ministers have described as a more proportionate regulatory response. The letter is reported to also state that this move is reflective of a new approach to regulation outlined in the Benefits of Brexit publication in January. The SNP has attacked the UK government for what they describe as an obscene level of hypocrisy. While the UK is being crippled by rail strikes because the government refuses to engage in brokering fair pay for ordinary workers. The UK government's plans to lift the bonus cap comes on top, of course, of Rishi Sunak's existing tax cut of over £7 billion for bankers. The SNP MSP Elena Whittam said, "No wonder the UK stands out as the most unequal country amongst its neighbours in northwest Europe, when these are the priorities of Westminster government. It's also no wonder that the Tories can't address that central finding in the Scottish Government's first paper, showing how Westminster control sees the UK lag behind its neighbours across a range of economic and social indicators." She went on, "They can't answer the question because they don't want to answer the question. They know it exposes how Westminster control sees power used to benefit their own and their own only. It is quite frankly obscene that when families are struggling with the cost of living crisis created by the Tories, Westminster is choosing to help their banking pals rake in even more money, whilst preaching to the rest of us to live within our means. It appears that if you are in Westminster or pals with Tory ministers, then you are exempt from the collective responsibility the Chancellor has repeatedly spoken of. Once again, it's one rule for them and another for the rest of us. This is dripping double standards that we see day after day of a broken Westminster system that Scotland knows it can do better than." So, Chris, Elena Whittam wasn't missing and hitting the wall there with her criticism of what's been disclosed. And indeed, the Labour leader in the House of Lords, Baroness Smith, accused the government of using two sets of rules, one for people on high incomes in the city and another for workers elsewhere. She said, "Does it not seem somewhat hypocritical to be saying to the city that those constraints are to be removed, whilst on the other hand, those who are working must have wage restraint?" So are Elena Whittam and and Baroness Smith both correct? This is simply another example of Tory double standards.
Yeah. I mean, wholeheartedly agree with that. And again, it does go a long way to show the inequality, the length and breadth of the country. And I mean, so many times the profits from the various and 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 I will use these words carefully. The various regions of the country. I'm not saying that Scotland is a region. I'm not saying that the Wales is a region, but I'm talking about the actual regions within those specific countries. The profits from those regions through industry and through technology and all the rest of it, through trade, everything all goes through Westminster, and it is there to uh, bolster the infrastructure, the prosperity, or all within the orbital of the M25, and that has been the case since, I would suggest maybe the end of the Second World War. Again, London being completely blitzed and stuff like that. Yes, it had to have an awful lot of money spent of it, and in order to build it back up. But when is this ever going to end? And the thought that struck me is that if the railways were as financially viable and financially returnable, shall we say, as the banking industry, then I'm sure the Tories would be on the side of the railway, as opposed to the side of the bankers. So I mean, it really is the highlights that the people who have got the Tories in their pocket,
Mhm.
and effectively run the party, because without their benevolence, financially, then the Tory party would be absolutely non-existent and totally ineffective.
That's
And
a
it
good
is,
point, Chris.
like one backhander for one rewards a backhander for the other, and that is the way that they operate.
Absolutely, Chris. And maybe the rail unions and the rail industry should realise that they should learn from the hedge fund managers and the bankers who have been funding the Conservative Party for the last few years. But we are pushed for time this evening, so let's move on to our next item this evening, which is that new figures from the Department of Work and Pensions show that around 120,000 households across the UK were subject to the benefit cap as of February 2022, and that's 220 more households capped at February 2022 when compared to November 2021. The SNP's Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary, Kirsty Blackman MP, called the policy disgraceful, pointing to growing anxiety over the cost of living crisis. Ms Blackman said that independence was the best way to end the policy completely in Scotland. Commenting, Kirsty Blackman MP said, "Ever since its introduction in 2013, this callous policy has done nothing but punish the most vulnerable and severely limit the ability to provide for themselves and their families, and now couldn't be a worse time for its effects to be felt and its limitations imposed on more households." She went on, "As a Tory-made cost of living crisis ravages households across the country, it is important that we look at ways of supporting people financially, not constructing more barriers and taking money out of their pockets. It's long past time this disgraceful policy went." So, firstly, Chris, surely that the benefits cap is very much in line with Rishi Sunak and Tory dogma policy. That policy being that the very poorest families have to be starved out of poverty. That's the usual approach, isn't it?
Yeah, 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 and it is a one of the most egregious and pernicious policies, to come out of the Tory party since the enactment of the poll tax, as far as I'm concerned. Because it does disproportionately affect the, I hate to use this 70s analogy, of the working classes, and people who are struggling to survive on median earnings, and that obviously excludes the sort of like blue collar workers and white collar workers, and I could go on, and we could talk about the how that feeds into the rise of neoliberalism. But I don't want to bore the viewers, and I'm conscious of time. But that this inequality has been kept alive by the Tory party to keep the class system ever present, So you will have a class society where the capitalists will always get richer on the back of the poorer. But what's happening is the fact that the poorer, whilst working, are actually what you would term working poor, not
Hmm.
poor through their own choice, but they're just poor because of the fact that the government won't lift their thresholds of earning up into meeting at least the median middle income.
Yep. Yep, completely, Chris. Thank you. Yes, the impact, the real impact of inflation on the poorest in our communities is only starting to be uncovered, and it's clear that this that this cap is making things worse for them. But let's move on to another item quickly, Chris, because an MSP has described two UK government Brexit trade bills as the thin edge of the wedge for Scotland's NHS, saying there will be grave consequences if the Scottish NHS is opened up to US style health corporations under Tory post Brexit trade plans. Currently, the UK Procurement Bill and Trade Australia and New Zealand Bill is going through Westminster, seeking to allow Tory ministers the power to amend devolved Scottish procurement legislation without the consent of the Scottish Parliament, thus undermining devolved powers. Such provisions create a precedent that the UK government could replicate with the Scottish NHS in future trade deals that include health, meaning Scotland's NHS could be filleted and served up to the US style private corporations. This comes as the Labour Party continues to harden its stance on Brexit, with Keir Starmer confirming his party would not allow EU citizens to move freely to the UK to work in organisations like the NHS. The SNP MSP Gillian Martin said, "Both these bills are the thin edge of the wedge and demonstrate that our NHS in Scotland faces grave consequences at the hands of the Tories and their Brexit catastrophe. With the power that these bills bestow on Westminster ministers, our health service faces being opened up to the highest bidder in any future trade deals covering health services." She went on, "Far too often now the UK government is producing legislation that undermines devolution by bypassing the scrutiny of a democratically elected Scottish Parliament. This is a power grab by the Tories, a party that Scotland has rejected for nearly a lifetime. The alarming rate that they are doing this shows they have no respect for devolution in Scotland, and I fear for what their actions could do to our health service." So, Chris, why should Scotland's NHS, for which, as you and I have been discussing, Scottish ministers are responsible, why should it be subject to rules and processes which are not made in Scotland?
Well, again, this is not a wholly unique scenario because the exact same thing will be applied in Wales as well. And it's, to my mind, I think it's high time that both Nicola Sturgeon and Mark Drakeford come out in unison, with each other and take a stance on this. Because if they successfully do this to the Scottish NHS, then they will do it to the Welsh NHS as well. And those are two different. They're the same, but they are wholly devolved to the two uh, respective nations. And this would then, if they were allowed to do this to the Scottish government, they would do it again, as I pointed out, to the Welsh government. Then further down the line, it would be applied possibly to, the food and drink industry, and then it would be applied to, the retail sector, and, because if it's procurement on medicines and stuff like that, then it would also apply to the procurement of. Uh,
Oh, I think we've lost Chris for a moment there. I suspect there's a problem with his Wi Fi. We'll give it 10 seconds and see if he's able to join us again. Nope. All right. I'm sure Chris will rejoin us in a moment. He'll come back in. But in the meantime, we'll move to the next story, which is that the bosses of major airlines have criticised the UK government for the chaos at airports across the country with huge staff shortages caused by Brexit. EasyJet boss John Lundgren says his company has turned down 8,000 job applications because candidates have been denied permission to work in the UK following Brexit. He has been joined by Jet2 boss Steve Heapy, who blames Brexit for taking hundreds of thousands, if not millions, out of the job market. And Ryanair chief executive Michael O'Leary told Sky News that the UK government couldn't run a sweetie shop. Those hoping to fly from Scottish airports have experienced similar problems. Commenting, the SNP MSP Jackie Dunbar said, "Every week we are seeing how the Tories and their disastrous Brexit obsession is costing Scotland dearly, and every day spent under Westminster control means we will suffer further disastrous consequences. When travelling abroad, we all want things to go smoothly, but the Tories have created incredible uncertainty for thousands of travellers with Brexit, which the people of Scotland did not vote for, but we have had imposed upon us against our will." Now, I think Chris is back with us now. Chris, can you
Yeah,
hear me?
sorry, I do apologise. Don't know what
No,
happened there.
no worries. It's not your fault. So, Chris, in the context of disruption in the air travel industry in the UK over the past few weeks, Michael O'Leary has said that Brexit has been an abject failure and says that resolvable labour shortages are behind the current disruption, and then summed it up saying this government couldn't run a sweetie shop. Is Michael O'Leary correct?
Michael O'Leary is, yes, very, very correct. You know, and obviously being a good patron of his company. You know, I wholeheartedly agree. But it has to take, you know, and not just Michael O'Leary as well, but you know, other air operators have to take some sort of responsibility. You know, and speaking obviously as the former uh, trade union rep at Glasgow Airport, I know this to be 100% factual. That the wholesale cuts of people's jobs at the airports during COVID, you know, has not played out well for the airline industry, the aviation industry, and you know the UK government itself, because the UK government facilitated many uh, people being lost out of the industry. And they have to recognise as well that you know through those losses, quite a lot of those losses, sadly, are actually down to COVID. You know,
Mhm.
and people are, obviously some people have died, some people are incapacitated due to long COVID and cannot return to the airport life. It is, you know, quite a stressful job
Mhm.
in many areas. Not you know, I mean, from checking people in to you know actually dispatching them on the aircraft and you know and sending them
Mhm.
on the holidays. Is you know a wholly uh, stressful industry. And they honestly, I don't think that the UK government supported that industry as well as they could have, you know, to retain these jobs. I mean, I still speak to comrades and colleagues that are at Glasgow Airport, and they lament about the lack of experience that are, you know, that has left that industry.
Yep.
And that's no slant on the people who are currently working there, I may add. You know, I mean, they're trying their level best, but you know, there is no accounting for a loss of experience in any industry.
Yep.
You know, whether it's aviation or whether it's catering or whether it's
Yep.
you know
Across all
hotels
sectors.
and
Yeah.
stuff like that. We see it
Yep.
the length and breadth of the country. There was one hotel in Devon that was one hotel manager in Devon was lamenting about the fact that he can't get chefs
Hmm.
and therefore they can't open his restaurant. Well,
Yep.
you know, hello, you know, I mean, this is because you have staved off, you know, like French chefs coming over, Italian chefs, Spanish chefs, you know,
Yep.
German, Polish,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and it's absolutely madness. It really is absolute madness. So yeah, Michael O'Leary has got a point, but again, it has to be cognizant to the fact that you know I think they acted too fast and too quick and they had they had a footloose and fancy-free attitude, devil may care, because they
Yes, of
thought
course.
that people would, clamber back into that industry. But people have now diversified into different industries and realise that
Yeah.
the grass is
Yes.
actually greener on the other side.
Yes, of course, Chris. Thank you. Now then, let's move on to the next story this evening, and we'll move to the United States because President Biden has announced his intention to appoint Marilyn Malerba, lifetime chief of the Mohegan Indian tribe, as U.S. Treasurer, marking the very first time a Native American signature will appear on U.S. currency. The U.S. Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, who is visiting the Rosebud Sioux tribe in South Dakota today, also announced the creation of a new Treasury Office of Tribal and Native Affairs, which will report to the Treasurer and will administer tribal relations. Ms. Malerba's appointment by President Biden will also allow Janet Yellen's signature to be added to the U.S. currency, as this was prohibited without a U.S. Treasurer in place. Dollar notes have been printed since Miss Yellen took office last year, with the former Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin's signature on them. The appointment helps reduce a long list of unfilled and unconfirmed senior positions at the Treasury. The Treasurer position has been vacant since January 2020. The US Treasurer directly oversees the US Mint, the Bureau of Printing and Engraving, and the storage of about $270 billion worth of gold at Fort Knox, and it liaises with the Federal Reserve. Ms. Malerba, who had a lengthy career as a registered nurse, has been chief of the Connecticut-based Mohegan tribe since 2010 and previously chaired its tribal council, and she served as its executive director of health and human services, according to the Mohegan website. So, Chris, first of all, uh, the Treasury Secretary Yellen's visit to the Rosebud Sioux Reservation is the first time that any Treasury Secretary has visited a tribal nation. The Treasury Department officials could find no record of a prior visit. That's pretty astonishing, isn't it? And pretty enlightening too about the treatment of Native Americans.
Yeah, I mean, throughout the show this evening, we've been talking about, equality, and it's
Mhm.
something that has been severely lacking in the American democratic society. The Native Americans have long been maligned and marginalized by successive administrations, and the indigenous tribes, have long been forgotten. And a person might look at this story and say, "Oh, this is, like uh, symbolism for tokenism." But I would wholeheartedly reject that idea, because you have to start somewhere, and it's long overdue. It should have happened, years ago. I mean, back, 1800s, 1700s. I mean, there was nothing uh, preventing from doing this apart from racism, and
Mhm.
that's the way that I see it. I mean, if you marginalise a section of community and don't allow them to fully participate in all of society, then that's effectively it's a form of racism to me, anyway.
Absolutely, Chris. Thank you. Now, let's come back to Scotland for our next item, because work is underway to implement legislation designed to support the well-being of healthcare staff and patients and will be completed by spring 2024. The Health and Care Staffing Act, passed by the Scottish Parliament in 2019, is the first workload and workforce planning legislation for the NHS and social care in Scotland. It aims to ensure appropriate staffing levels are in place to support high quality care for patients and service users. The legislation is also designed to embed a culture of openness so that workers are informed about decisions relating to staffing and also feel able to raise any concerns. Work will begin now in conjunction with professional bodies, trade unions, and staff to develop guidance and tools to support the implementation of the legislation. Alongside this, NHS health boards will pilot and test the guidance and tools and share learning across Scotland to support full implementation by 2024. The Health and Social Care Secretary Hamza Yousaf said, "This legislation will mean that the right people with the right skills are in the right place at the right time, ensuring the best outcomes for patients and service users. The provisions in the Act will promote safe and appropriate staffing across our NHS and social care services, and in turn improve patient experience." So, Chris, the first thing that crossed my mind, thinking back to your experience in the aviation industry, this legislation talks about openness and honesty in culture, where workers are engaged in relevant processes and informed about decisions. And sometimes I'm struck by the difference between some sectors. For example, the aviation industry, where openness and honesty, especially after an accident, are recognised as being fundamental and critical, whereas the
Yeah.
health sector, perhaps even just historically, that was much less the case. So, do you think, will this legislative structure, will this encouragement as a matter of law, will that help those working in the health and social care sectors to improve the level of honesty and openness and thereby improve patient care and service user experience?
Yeah, yeah, and because this is going to be, embedded in law, then it allows for recourse to be taken, and again, this feeds back into the last NHS story that we were talking about looking at the whole of the NHS in uh, uh, from a holistic point of view, and and carrying out root and branch radical reform of how we can introduce uh, accountability and transparency, in every department, in every walk of life, where it actually pertains to our National Health Service. And again, that has to be done, in the hospitals and out of the hospitals as well. Which is why the Scottish Government have decided to radically change the way that we think about, health and social care. And honestly, for once, I would really like the unionist parties to get off the Scottish Government's case, with the Garden NHS, because obviously we've not been able to do this over the last 2 years, and yet in order to and don't get me wrong, I do recognise that there are some real inadequacies within the NHS. It's far from wonderful, but in order to fix it, you have to understand the complexity of the problems. It's not just one individual issue that needs. There are a million different strands in order to fix one actual individual issue. So whilst we're trying to do our best with the NHS going forward, in order to radically change, the way that it operates, you have to look at the whole thing, from sort of like top to bottom, and and
Yep.
and and decide what things have got to be changed and what things, could possibly stay the same, and what things could, be done better. So
Yep.
again, it's within the gift of the opposition parties to attack the Scottish Government because they're in charge. That's fine. And again, we go back to the accountability of ministers as well. That, in order for them, to challenge us, and where we're getting it right, we can actually offer a wholesome rebuttal of their accusations, by actually pointing out and saying, no, this is where we've actually learned how to do something different, and this will, hopefully bring us better results. If those better results don't turn up, then obviously we need to look at it again.
Completely, Chris. Thank you, and I hope certainly that as this legislation encourages the working together of professional bodies, trades unions, and staff to develop the guidance and tools to support the implementation, I hope that is able to be put in place and that it works well in order to make such to support making all of the changes to social care and Scotland's NHS that you and I were discussing earlier on in the programme. However, time is against us this evening, and that was our final item this evening. In making these programmes, Broadcasting Scotland relies on the support of viewers and others who value our distinctive approach to news, current affairs and culture. Please help us to continue to make these programmes, to continue to develop the station, and to make new programmes for you. If you would like to support us, then please subscribe or donate to Broadcasting Scotland. You will find the link to do that on the screen now. You will see that we've been making appeals for financial assistance on Facebook and Twitter for the last several weeks, and we have received a great deal of support. However, the need for financial support never goes away, and so please, if you are able to support us in that way, we encourage you to do so. There are other ways in which you can contribute to our work. If you would like to volunteer to work with Broadcasting Scotland, either behind the scenes or in front of or in any other way, then please visit our website at www.broadcastingscotland.scot and send us a message there. You can also find us on Twitter at BroadcastScot, or you can search for us on Facebook, search for Broadcasting Scotland. Meantime, we will be here again tomorrow evening with the next edition of Scotland at 7, so please tune in and join us again then. And that's the way it is at very nearly Scotland at 8. I'd like to say thank you to everyone who has been watching this evening, and of course, a very special thanks to our very special guest, Chris McCusker. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, well, I would actually like to apologise to the viewers for overrunning in time, but
Oh,
such as it, such as the items that we're obviously discussing, I was getting carried away in one of my socialist rants, so I do
not at all.
apologise.
Not at all. You are well qualified to talk on all of the stories this evening, and we really appreciate your thoughts and your contributions to Scotland at 7. So, as I say, that's the way it is at very nearly Scotland at 8. Thank you for everyone. Thank you to everyone who's been watching. Thank you to Chris. I hope you have a very peaceful evening and that you can join us again here on Broadcasting Scotland very soon. Bye bye.